Well, I am very proud and pleased to welcome Ruthellyn Musil, and I will tell you, I must give a disclaimer prior, because everything I say about her is going to be glowing, fawning, complimentary, bordering on obsequiousness. The reason being is I would not be here today if it weren't for Ruthellyn. And I'm not going to tell you that long-winded story because I would take away from her time, but suffice to say, literally, she's kept me employed for the last 16 years. Both at the Tribune Company and now at Loyola, and that is, I'm dead serious. So let me tell you a little bit about Ruthellyn. She capped an illustrious career, 36-year veteran, I believe, of Tribune Company in 2007. She started out there when she was 12, obviously, if you look at her. Now 40, she was able to retire early thanks to marrying well. And she started out in a number of communications functions at the Chicago Tribune and rose to be the senior, I believe, the most senior female at the Tribune Company in its more than 106-year history. Her last position was Senior Vice President of Corporate Communications, and her job entailed the simple job of external, internal communications and serving as the public face to Wall Street, which is quite a pickle when you've got a public company and you've got a lot of things going on. You've got to be very good at your messaging so that you keep that stock price up. So outstanding career. In particular, I'd like to note, in an organization, Tribune is and was a very heavy boys club. Remains today. So I would say there definitely is a glass ceiling there, and she was able to bust through it. So way to go, Ruthellyn. Ruthellyn earned her bachelor's degree at Loyola. She earned her MBA at Northwestern. She has been a champion benefactor along with her husband Ron, who's here in the pretty yellow sweater, of Loyola for a number of years. She joined the board in 2005. She serves on the executive committee of the board, which is really the grand poobah power board people that help the president get our strategic goals accomplished. In addition, Ron and Ruthellyn have a home in Tuscany. They have hosted students from the JFRC, I believe, 2 years running. And I have heard from students, and there's a student here who went, that it's one of the highlighted study abroad trips that those students over studying in Rome get to take. It is incredible, and I've never been there. I'm happy to be invited, though. Just saying. Especially after these glowing fawning. In addition to her role at Loyola, Ruthellyn serves on the board of the McCormick Foundation. It used to be called the McCormick Tribune Foundation. It is one of the nation's largest charities. They give away tons of money to a variety of worthwhile causes, I believe including Loyola, which is lovely. She is very fond of Dean Hyder and the School of Communications, so those are kind of the areas of love. She's also Vanda Hay Foundation is a community organization supporting the Fox Valley region of Wisconsin. She's on that board. They have a home in Wisconsin. And before I turn it over to Ruthellyn, I just want to make her blush a moment longer because this was fun. In addition to all she's done from a career perspective, there's so much more to Ruthellyn. She is a trusted, devoted partner and wife, and they have an incredible marriage and have been a role model on that front. She was a loving, considerate, generous daughter to her mother and father, single child, had a lot of burden when they got older, that sandwich generation thing. An intelligent, motivating champion and mentor, and a dependable, supportive, giving friend. So I would like to welcome Ruthellyn to tell her story.
Well, thanks to Kelly, I really don't have any remarks to give you. I think you know everything. But I really I do appreciate Kelly's friendship. I appreciate the warm introduction. I'm still brushing the shards of glass out of my hair, but you know, that will come. I'll tell you a little bit more about that a little later. So Leanne and Janet, thank you for having me here today. I'm really pleased to be here. It's an honor to participate in this Loyola Chicago program because, as Kelly mentioned, the university has really been a part of my life for more than 35 years. First, as an undergraduate, I actually was a commuter student at the Water Tower campus. I never made it to Lakeshore because I was running back and forth between Tribune Tower and the Water Tower campus to finish my undergrad, which is in English. And now to be a trustee and a member of the executive committee is kind of like a dream come true. It comes full circle. So I really, as you can tell, value my relationship with Loyola. And I also see, as Kelly's helped me identify, there's a lot of other of my Loyola colleagues here today in addition to the students and staff. So thanks to all of you for being here today. I really appreciate your support and good friendship as well. Speaking of support, as Kelly mentioned, I'm delighted that my husband, Ron, can be with us today. And I thank him for being with me in just about every phase of my career and beyond. I'll tell you a funny little anecdote. Ron and I met because we were both working at the Chicago Tribune. He was personnel manager, and I think I was working in the public service office at that point. And one of the things I wanted to do was get my MBA, as Kelly mentioned. I wasn't going to mention that it was from a competing university, but that was one of the things that I wanted to do. So, who do you go to ask about a program like that but the personnel department? So here's Ron, personnel manager. So really from that was kind of the beginning of how he encouraged me. And I was actually the first person at the Chicago Tribune to do the executive master's program at Northwestern. I was in something they numbered EMP 11, and now I think they're on about EMP 250. So that one makes me feel a little old too. But anyway, thanks, Ranichi, for all your support. So let's turn to our conversation today. I'm humbled that I've been asked to share some of my experiences. But more importantly, what I really want to do is kind of leave each one of you with something that might be helpful in your own personal development as you move forward. Whether you're a student and have a huge career ahead of you, a staff, you might be mid-career. Some of us are, starting a whole nother chapter of our lives. So hopefully you'll find a little nugget to take away. And again, I think because we all share this common bond of Loyola Chicago, I really want to underscore the influence that our university and its Jesuit missions and values have had throughout my career. So I don't think I would have been able to make some of the choices and decisions that I did if I didn't have that kind of a strong grounding. So it's of huge value. So when I thought about, how could I tell my story, I thought I'm going to talk to you about it in sort of 3 distinct phases. I'm going to talk about kind of getting started, then what I call hitting my stride, and then the last phase of it, where I am now, and that's kind of shifting gears. And of course, as we all know, through all our steps in life, there are lessons that you learn all along the way. So getting started for me was what I thought was going to be a summer job in the Chicago Tribune's public service office, and little did I know that it was going to end up being a 36-year career. The lesson here that I really like to remind people is get your foot in the door. And then, to make the most of it, even if it's not what you think you want to do for the rest of your life, it's going to be, there's always some value in getting started and meeting other people and just getting, as I said, get your foot in the door. And then once you've landed what you might think of as kind of that entry-level job, I'm a big believer that you need to create your own development plan. Identify mentors that you can trust. One that I had once encouraged me to take a job I didn't want. I remember sitting across the table from him, and actually it was, you can see the public service office at Tribune as a reoccurring theme in my career, but I had worked in the public service office. I had kind of been on this track. I wanted to be a copywriter and do some of the things in the promotion department. But this was an opportunity. They needed a new manager of the public service office. And I sat across the table from the man who would be my boss, and he just said to me, "It's the brass ring, take it." And I had to kind of suck it up and say, okay, I'm going to give it a try. And it really worked because it helped me to develop some pretty significant management skills beyond what I would have done on a different career path. So I also like to remind people you can volunteer for assignments beyond what's in your current job description, or if you're a student, while you're here on campus, there's lots and lots of wonderful volunteer opportunities that may present a career that you never even thought of before. And all in all, you'll be expanding your capabilities. I think to sum that little segment up, I think you just can't wait for other people to develop you. It's truly your own responsibility, and you'll always be respected for taking that initiative. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit to 1985, and that's when I kind of felt I was beginning to hit my stride. I'd been at Tribune for almost 15 years at that point, and I was the public relations manager, again, for the newspaper. And it was kind of a very interesting time. Changing technology was affecting everything that we did. And suddenly the newspaper was confronted with a strike by production unions. And I found myself leading the company's communication strategy. And I did this, I had a lot of supporters, but as all of us have found in our career, I also had some people who thought I couldn't do it. So despite that lack of support, I just kind of forged forward. And I think learned a big lesson at that particular period of time, because as Kelly knows, when you're the spokesperson, I was doing a lot of TV interviews and things like that. And so, how do you really craft the company's message? How do you speak positively about your company and not so negatively about what is, in some respects, perceived as the enemy? But I think what I learned there, in the case of the strike, where I had to explain why the company needed to control its business practices, I really learned the importance of being open and honest. And so as we think about things like that, again, a little bit of a nugget that I hope you'll take away from is no matter what your situation or what you have to convey, you'll never go wrong if you simply start with the truth. So that's one of the fundamentals. And interestingly enough, at different parts in my career, as Kelly knows, talking to Wall Street, very often and those of you who watch CNBC or just see a lot in the media, you hear a lot about the spin doctors that are out there. And I think very often, and I'm very proud of the fact that at Tribune, whenever we were confronted with an issue, we'd sit around the table and we'd say, how are we going to tell the public? How are we going to tell Wall Street about this? And it was kind of fundamentally in our just behind closed doors, we always said, well, let's start with the truth and then figure out what we can say beyond that. And just to underscore, it always served us well, and I think it can serve any of you well looking forward. Now I'm going to talk about another aspect of what I call hitting your stride, and that's kind of working through the bumps along the way, because as we know, it happens to everybody. In my case, what I needed to do was refine my people management skills. Because I put very heavy demands on myself, I expected the same of others. And too often, I found myself focusing on the negatives rather than the positives. So thanks to some great coaches, and I think one of those was probably my husband at some point along the way, I was able to really turn that around. And so that helped me learn the value of teamwork, and again, enabled me to make a lot of good friends along the way. And as Kelly mentioned, and I really don't like to make a big deal of it, but I think I would be remiss today if I didn't mention the fact that in the 90s, I was one of just a few women in the corporate ranks at Tribune, and I think even as we looked out, it wasn't just Tribune that didn't have a lot of women in the corporate ranks. There were very few women on corporate boards, and thanks to organizations here in Chicago like Catalyst and some other places like that, we make great strides. But back in the 90s, I was one of a few. And I guess in some respects, I used to call myself the poster child for development, because I was kind of breaking down walls, it seemed like a lot. But I think I was successful because I was able to focus on the opportunities rather than the challenges. And that kind of kept me from continually thinking, I'd look around the table and say, gee, I'm the only girl here. But if I thought about what we needed to accomplish and what the opportunities were, the challenges didn't seem so daunting. And another little aside, it is kind of funny with the McCormick Foundation, which I'm now, as Kelly mentioned, a member of. I'll talk a little bit about that later. I'm at the table with all my former bosses. So the first couple of meetings that I attended with the McCormick Foundation, I had to have this little conversation with myself saying, now, Ruthellyn, remember, you don't report to them anymore. You're a full-fledged board member. But again, that's one of those things that I'm sure you've all had situations where you've had these similar conversations with yourself. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about shifting gears, because I think at some point in time we all recognize the need to shift gears. And for those of you who are still in school, it might be as simple as changing your major. Or if you're working, it might happen mid-career when you realize it's time to move on. In my case, it came after 36 years at Tribune. And after several years, as we talked about in this role as the company's senior communications officer and a member of the corporate staff, I retired in 2007. And the catalyst for that was the company was going private. And as you know, my primary job was to talk to Wall Street, we were no longer going to be talking to investors. So it gave me a wonderful opportunity to do something and shift gears and do something that I wanted to do for a long time. So the downside was that slowing down was a lot harder than I'd anticipated. And I think you can ask Ron about that. He used to kid me because I would not sit down, and there were all these to-do lists that he had been retired for 2 or 3 years before I was, and so he would say, just chill out, calm down. We're still working on that, but my role as a Loyola trustee really helped fill that initial gap, as did the opportunity, as we talked about, for Ron and I to spend extended periods living the life in Tuscany and becoming so deeply involved with the John Felice Rome Center. And again, I'm just really delighted to see a couple of the students that spent some time with us. Well, I think one of the highlights of spending this extended period were the 2 Tuscan Experience weekends that we were able to organize, and really just to get to know so many of the students on a personal level in such a beautiful country. As Kelly mentioned, last year I joined the board of the McCormick Foundation, which is the legacy of the founder of the Chicago Tribune. McCormick has assets of $1.3 billion, and the foundation grants about $60 million annually to nonprofit organizations dealing with civics, dealing with journalism, dealing with education, and then we have a little area that we call special initiatives, which is really nice because it allows board members to bring certain things to the attention of the full board and get funding for things that might not ordinarily be thought of. Loyola is one of McCormick's top 10 beneficiaries, and over the years, since the foundation was established in 1955, Loyola's received $15 million. So I'm very proud of that, and you should all know too that there isn't a board meeting that goes by that we don't talk a little bit about what's going on at Loyola. Yesterday, and Justin was very helpful in prepping me for this, we talked a little bit about the work of the Interfaith Youth Corps, and actually approved a grant so that we could continue to support the Interfaith Youth Corps. So I'm always proud to be of my involvement at Loyola when I'm at some of these other meetings. And as Kelly mentioned, I also serve on the board of a small family foundation in Wisconsin. And what we focus on there is we fund organizations that promote family harmony, which is really kind of a nice way to say that we do a lot with abused women and children. So that's a focus, and it's nice to be able to spend time doing that. So I think to sum up some of that philanthropy, after many years of worrying about corporate earnings, I can't tell you how refreshing it is now to be thinking about giving it back and giving money to some really wonderful causes. So I'm happy to be participating in that. So I think, as you can probably tell, shifting gears from corporate to philanthropy has really been enormously rewarding for me. And I think, again, trying to come back to some nuggets that you might take away from this today, I think it's a really good example of how just about anybody can repurpose a skill set and use it in a new and different way. Personally, I'm enjoying the opportunity to give back and hopefully inspire others to do the same. So no matter how small, I think keep in mind that each of us has some special gift that can help others, even if it's simply just a warm smile. So I'm going to conclude, and I hope the phases of my career that I've kind of shared with you today, each with its own learnings and challenges, will help you think about your own situation just a little differently. And I hope that these kind of brief setup remarks will maybe serve as a launch pad for your discussion and some questions later. So thank you very much to everybody for being here today. I've really enjoyed it.